Hello, today I'm going to show you how to build the trickier parts of the traction engine. In section 7, take the wax candle and run it around the neck near the spacer you've glued on, and also near the far end in the corresponding place where it's going to pass through that part. Push through here with no glue, put the spacer number 8 with no glue on, and then this assembly that you've just built, feed through and engage the teeth and push all the way through with no glue to this end. Then just slightly bring that forward so you've got a gap between the spacer and the toothed assembly. Run some glue around and then twist the shaft there to just get the glue around between the two. And then take part number 11, put some glue inside the hole, wipe it off, put a glue guard here so you don't get any glue on the side, and then just push that on, turning as you go to spread the glue. Don't pinch it too tight, and then pull the glue guard out before the glue dries. And wait a good 15 minutes for this assembly to dry before trying to turn it, and it should revolve and make both toothed assemblies go round. For the next part of the assembly, I'm going to be using this alignment guide that's provided in the bottom of the box. It's so that you can line up the pieces in both directions perfectly parallel, which is very important for this next section. Right, in section 24 you'll have glued these pieces together, and the most important thing is that when you glue this peg in and that spacer, glue not only the peg into this piece but glue the spacer to the peg and to the side, so it's really rigid and fixed. And again, as it's shown in the instructions, keep this flat side down and the curved to the top. Then push without glue this small part on and push through with glue in this hole. Through and slightly beyond, because you have a spacer to put on. Be generous with the glue around the end of the peg. Then push another spacer number 44 on the other side. Pinch tightly, and then use the provided cardboard guide. Put the piece of wood that's also provided, part number 46, and just bring together so that they are nipping that, and line everything up, the shafts with guidelines and parallel, and just leave to dry for a good 15 minutes. This needs to be very solid before you try and attempt anything else. Another quick point for section 24 is when this is dried fully, you'll then be putting these pieces on. Just take note that the shorter side, and there is a longer side, you put these pieces on the longer side. It does tell you in the instructions, but it is important to note because it's to do with the lining up of this element later on. Moving on to section 25, you've built this assembly. Just put it in by threading the cog on the outside and these two little pegs through that slot, and hold it in place. And this assembly that you've just made in 24, the piece with the spinning part goes first. Just slide that in with no glue. Then put glue along here, just along here, carefully down that side, and on these two surfaces here. This is where you need several pairs of hands. You need to feed this shaft through the hole here and then lift this cog up and around. This shaft here. There. As you can see, it does need several pairs of hands, and then it's the lining up of the pegs. Probably easiest to do these 4 at the bottom first. And then these pegs often pop out. These should be moving, that should be moving, and this, if you turn at the bottom, should engage those toothed cogs. Now if you do feel any sticking there, it might be that your pegs on this large wheel are catching on the edge of the other toothed wheel. Just exert some pressure on them, just to push them in a bit if any are, if you haven't done any perfectly straight, and it should work as smoothly as that. What's nice about the traction engine is that all through the build, as you get to certain key stages, you can test everything's working and know not to proceed if something's sticking, and as each stage goes on, as long as you can turn and all the toothed cogs work, that everything will be all right later on. So we're on section 30 now, and your model should be able, if you turn this large wheel, be able to move like that. Next stage is to wax these runners and also wax the ends of the legs on this piece. Make sure that you've got the fork to the rear of the traction engine, and you've taken the peg that came across here, taken that out. Now mark on this piece here 16mm from the end using the ruler provided. Then put some glue just along here. And what you need to do is just tilt the model up, get those legs dropping down in, and then check in the rear that you have it 16mm. The mark glued there, and check that these legs are in the runners. They might just have to fiddle that to get those to drop into the runner, and then push this peg back through the fork and through the other side, and put a dab of glue on, and making sure that you've got those runners in the groove and that's glued. You should be able to turn that handle again, and that will run like that and leave to dry for a good 15 minutes. Just a quick tip for section 31, these little pegs only stick out 2 or 3mm. Don't use a glue guard for putting the spacers on. Just very carefully, it's a bit of a fiddle, place them over the pegs with no glue, and then just put a dab of glue over the top. Sorry. And there. Try not to get it on the cogs like I have, and just press it over, and that'll dry and that'll hold those on. Right, in section 32 you've glued this shaft in with the angle side on that side and the straight side there. Take this tube with no glue, just push on, then run for about 5mm back, glue all the way around, and push one of these discs on. Just spin it as you go just to smear the glue. As I say, about 5mm gap back. Don't worry about it wobbling. put some more glue on the surface of that spacer and push on this pre-made cog. Push along, again just check that you've got it, the 5mm. More glue around, and the second disc just to help hold the cog in place. And again just check it spins square, tilt it and adjust it if it doesn't. Then the next spacer is glued. Again, just run some glue a little bit back from the end. Push this spacer on and spin to spread the glue. And then the handle, which I've pre-glued the end on, glue around, but not in that end. And push the handle on and just push it so it's square with the end of the tube, so just move it back before the glue's dried. And then this cap, bit of glue on the inside, smear off any excess and just push on the end there. And then when this is dried, obviously this handle should turn freely. Right, we're on section 33 and I just wanted to show you how you place this, because this is not a matter of measurement, it's a matter of the cogs meshing, the teeth of the cogs. Put some glue on here. If you've got super glue, put a couple of blobs on just to help speed the process up, and place in line the edge of the frame. And there you can see the teeth have meshed. It's easiest to turn this large wheel and just test it by turning it. And if you're happy with that, just sit and hold that very still for a couple of minutes till the super glue is taken. Right, we're now on section 35 and you've assembled this piece with the rotating tab there. Put the first one of these two, slide it down with no glue, but just put some glue on the underside, and on the other one some glue on the underside in preparation. Now you need to feed this underneath here but above that higher cog, up through, and then glue this tab at an angle on there. You'll have to move it, just hold it with your finger at the moment. Then drop this next tab down, and you're gluing him at the top, right at the very top of that piece of plywood. And you just need to hold them, you'll need to use your other finger to hold that up so it doesn't drop out. So at the moment, as you can see with the two tabs in place, you know, this peg can fall out, so you just drop that spacer down, put some glue at the top between the spacer and the peg to make a glue joint, and then make sure you've got this pushed fully up to the underside of that tab and press that down, not too tight, and that will then, when the glue's dried, hold that in place from that peg dropping out, and then just leave to dry for a good 15 minutes for these tabs to be firmly secure to the side. Right, we're on section 37 and I've just pre-glued this part. I've made sure that shaft is in that hole with no glue. Then I've glued that piece to the top side of that spacer, and then that spacer to the top side of that, so that when you move, turn the handle, this will rotate on that shaft that it's glued to. I've also pre-glued this peg into the underside of here because I find it easier to do it now rather than slightly later on. You've just assembled this, and you slide this little spacer on with no glue. With this pointing backwards, push that with no glue through that tab. Actually, I push, sorry, I'm doing it wrong. Push that up there with no glue, and then feed that through that tab, again with no glue. Then got one of the little small 44 spacers, push it on with no glue, put a dab of glue on the underside to hold it in place. Then, when that glue has dried, push this whole tab backwards on itself like that. Then thread the next one of these little flat-edged spacers on here. Turn the handle. Just check everything's still moving. And just wait for this push that spacer up, down, a blob of glue between the two, and push that up, and then just leave to dry before we do the next section. Right, now that spacer and that tab have glued firmly to that shaft, you'll now see that when I turn, this rocks from side to side, which in turn makes that tab move from side to side, which will eventually be making the steering wheel move. So when you're happy that that seems to be in a nice position, just put a dab of glue on either side of those spaces just to hold them in place. Then on section 41, take this piece, put this in here with no glue, this peg, drop that down, again with no glue, but then some glue all around the spacer and the part, around the shaft and the part, and drop this spacer down, which will glue that in place. And then this peg, as shown, is glued in there, and again put some glue around the part and the shaft, and drop the spacer on and leave to dry for about 15 minutes. Just showing in your section 46 how this whole pivoting mechanism should work once everything's glued. It rotates round, and these pieces here are not glued to each other, so there's a little bit of a slack for them to move backwards and forwards to allow for the various changes in movement. So just to show you, that's what yours should look like. Right, we're on section 51, and you've got these two pegs, 4x10mm pegs either side of this pivot joint, but they're not glued in. And if you fit the block in and engage them with this block, but just stick something like a thin pencil or something round and just rotate so that you can make sure the pegs are not in the channel, because first of all you want to feed this assembly through and let the cogs engage, and then you can push them in place and glue them from the outside. Then feed on this spacer, the thinner of the two. Again, no glue until you've pushed it along. And a little bit of glue. Then this spacer. Then some glue. Then the wheel on with 8mm protruding, and just push the spacer up to the wheel. Now the glue's dried, I just want to show how that weighted wheel should rest and engage with the teeth. Right, section 56 is the placement of this piece. I've put some glue on the arch already and I've waxed these two. Just carefully get these two pegs through those two grooves, and the little peg, I'll just turn it slightly, this peg in through this hole on the front. Then put that rod back in there. This should be roughly in line with the edge of that groove, but I'll show you the adjustment you can make if it's not working. Then you need to put this tiny peg in through here. Bear with me while I just locate it. Put some glue on the end. Just work that in through. And just carefully turn the wheel to check that both these parts are moving backwards and forwards. There. And you can, as I say, move this backwards and forwards to get the best movement, and then just leave the glue to dry when you feel you've got the best movement. Right, section 62C, you've just placed this arm here, and I just want to talk to you about this tab here. The positioning of it's quite important, but it is just a matter of playing around. If you just push this part on with no glue, it's quite a tight fit, so it will stay in place where you put it. Must be nice and loose, a good millimetre gap. Then, without glue, just to start off, locate these two pegs. There. And just hold it and pull this peg up and down, and just check that that under peg is pushing the flat surface of that little tab. And if it's not, or if it's catching, or if it's not allowing it to lift up, just take the arm off and just twizzle that little tab a bit, just so you can get it that it has that movement. Then you can just take this apart and put glue on there, and then just glue it together. Right, we're on section 71, and you've just glued in this peg. Make sure you push it fully in, and you've rounded off one end, and it should be lining up with that slot. Then you've made this assembly, and you're going to put some glue underneath and push it right to the back of that place there, with the underside of this over the top of that little peg, so that peg raises it up and down. So put the glue on. Excuse my fingers for a moment. Push it right to the back, and then just slide it from side to side. A bit further, so that when you turn the handle, as you can see, that lifts up. The next thing to do is the placement of the man, and I just wanted to pass comment that when you put him in place with that peg between the groove, you also glue him far enough forward to allow for the thickness of this part being put in place. Just a tip for section 75, when you're putting on this arm, glue that little tab on one of the flat sides, kind of parallel, at the same angle as the steering wheel, because it is going to rest on the steering wheel at that angle. Before the glue's just completely dried, put the arm on over the peg, locate the peg, and locate the peg over that one. And just, if you need to adjust slightly, you can, because the glue's not dried. And then leave that to dry. So the arm has dried now, and with a bit of adjustment, this is the effect you should get. So it takes a little bit of playing around with to get it to move as you wish, but that's the finished result.